We are in Champions League, man.
That was my next
Dilly din, dilly dong, come on.
Encara Messi, 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 gol, 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 gol.
Into Sheringham, and Solskjaer has won it!
I will love it if we beat them. Love it.
This is the Modern Soccer Coach Podcast with Gary Curneen.
Hello, welcome to the Modern Soccer Coach Podcast. My name is Gary Curneen. First of all, I hope everyone is doing okay, keeping safe and listening to the instructions from the experts. Our guest today is Rulani Mokwena. This is a brilliant episode. He's the new coach at Chippa United in South Africa, formerly Orlando Pirates. Phenomenal insight, phenomenal journey. Can't wait to hear what you think about this one. At Gary Curneen on Twitter, at Gary Curneen on Instagram. This podcast is sponsored by Total Football Analysis, monthly magazine with 120 plus pieces of analysis per month, along with a website which is an all-access subscription, allowing you to get back access to all the magazines plus every piece of content on the site. Total Football Analysis, it's a must for every coach. Every day there's a new article out. Discount code MSC20 gets you 20% off everything on the site up until the end of April. If you haven't subscribed to Total Football Analysis, please go ahead and do so. Here is Rulani. Enjoy. Rulani, thanks so much for joining me today for the Modern Soccer Coach Podcast. Really excited to have you on.
No, thanks, Gary. It's my pleasure to be with you.
A nice, easy one for you to start. I mean, obviously, different coaches listening to this, high school, club, college, youth coaches, parent coaches. How would you describe your coaching philosophy, your playing philosophy?
Yeah, I think for me, mine is. I think it resonates with my philosophy. I think as a person, I'm structured. I'm demanding of myself, and I think mainly that also it resonates in my coaching philosophy and playing philosophy. And already that for me is, from a mental perspective, extremely demanding for players, because I try to teach as much as I possibly can, and that includes a lot of video footage, a lot of training sessions, a lot of team meetings, where you discuss, with the aid also of video technology, you discuss prearranged tactical agreements. But be that as it may, I think the main objective for me is always having a clear idea of how you want your team to play, and I've got that within also a pragmatic way of understanding that it's also influenced by the stature, the culture of the club, the quality of the players that you have, and then once you've established that, you then set obviously your clear objectives, playing principles, sub principles within that. So, yeah, as much as I'm also one of the coaches that believes a lot in possession. I still also believe that a team has to be extremely fluid. A team has to be adaptable to different variables, because that's what football is about, And we try to make sure that even in what we have as an understanding, as a framework, as an ideology, we are still adaptable to different scenarios, guided obviously by clear principles and clear ideas. Because once everyone is on board, it's easier to sell those to the players.
You mentioned something there I want to go back to. So demanding, being intense. You mentioned there about in your meetings, in your video analysis. So do you think there's, obviously with the type of coaches like Pep, who obviously takes 3 seasons and then needs a break, and then you have Pochettino recently, where it looks like the players sometimes need a break from that coach. Is it hard to sustain that intensity in your work and get through or get along with players?
It's extremely difficult. But I think you've mentioned Pep. I think you've mentioned Pochettino. Look at Nagelsmann also. I think is one of the coaches that are extremely intense, and maybe the change at Hoffenheim came at the right time for him. To go to Leipzig was probably at the right time to say, the change of manager, change of breath sometimes is needed, because I mean, we talk a lot as technicians about the Jose Mourinho third season syndrome, but also he's one of the coaches that is known for his intensity and is known. In fact, just yesterday I was reading something about Carlo Ancelotti and the influence that he's had on Everton. And it was clear. What was very interesting for me was how they put the personality traits between a Carlo Ancelotti and Marcelo Bielsa in relation to how your personality sometimes, in relation to the result, helps you, or is a clear antidote for criticism and scrutiny. Sometimes when you are the Carlo Ancelotti way, and where you're calm, you're passive, and you try to formulate good relations with your players, and that is number one in your priority as a manager. You win, that's the praise. They give you the plaudits for that personality. You lose, it comes, oh no, but he's too timid. He's too laissez-faire in his approach. But when you are like a Bielsa, demanding, when you are the Mourinho, when you are the Pochettino, and you're demanding, it's good when you're getting the results. But at times, it is clear that obviously there will be, at a certain point, a psychological breakdown, because with tension, of course, comes a lot more barriers than with a little bit more of a laissez-faire sort of approach. So yeah, it's not easy, but I think it's one way we've got to find the balance, because as much as you want to be demanding and drive the passion across, you've got to try find, and maybe a typical example is a Klopp. You do see him, how he resonates and puts the human being first with his football players, but he still manages to show the passion and the drive to succeed, and look what he's done at Liverpool. But the same can be said about him when he was at Mainz, and his stint there, and how that ended. Dortmund and his stint there, and how that ended. So I think as a coach, you've just got to also be flexible in your approach, because of course society is changing, and because society is changing, players are changing, the mentality is changing, their outlook to problems and to pressure and stress, and how they deal with that is also changing. So as coaches, then we've also got to find ways where we adapt to the changes in society, and try to find different ways to deal with players differently, because different players adapt to different personalities differently too.
Brings us along nicely to how we adapt to our players, or adapt our philosophy to our players. How difficult is it, or how challenging is it to adapt your philosophy to a passionate fan base at a club like Orlando Pirates, where I don't know what the average attendance is? I'm guessing that it's pretty high. I'm guessing it's high energy. When you want to play that possession game, and you have fans that are, come on, hey, let's see some goal action. I know it happens at Old Trafford quite a bit. How difficult is it to coach that patience with the crowd that's maybe not as patient as we'd like them to be?
Yeah, it's I think when we arrived, I think the basis was trying to find a correlation between our possession statistics and the number of goals that Orlando Pirates had in the previous seasons. And this was under Mitchell, Milutins Rejovic as the head coach. And we could easily relate with a lot more support from a lot more other basis of stats and data that we accumulated. And one of the biggest priorities for us was to retain possession for a little bit longer. But the culture at Orlando Pirates, of course, like I mentioned earlier, is your philosophy has got to also be adaptable to the culture and the stature of the club. The Pirates is a club that is known for its influence and its bravery. and as from its history and how it was founded, and the people that led it, and the chairman, of course, Dr. Ivan Koza, are people that are of course, when you speak to those that know them even better, they use the words bravery, they use the words huge influence, and that's the type of football that Orlando Pirates tries to play, a game that is of huge influence, that tries to move with the times, and maybe even be ahead of the times, and as a club, that is what the club is about. But it's also a club that is extremely brave, and that needs to for sure move with the type of football that is played on the pitch, and the clarity on that is the clear observation is when you check how much the supporters would love a coach like Victor Bondarengo still, a coach like Kostadin Papic, and these were two coaches that played very open, entertaining football with lots of goals, but won very little in terms of silverware, but are remembered as legends in the Orlando Pirates culture and history. So it's a support base that is extremely passionate and that wants its team to go forward. But sometimes that passion and that drive, that gung ho approach, doesn't always allow you to have control. Because you then play based on tempo and intensity. One, you can't maintain that for 90 minutes, and two, you then can't really influence certain moments of the games except through trying to influence different dynamics in different positions. But we had to then try to say to ourselves, how do we then use possession as a basis where we could have split personalities, personality where we could dominate in possession, try to play for the intensity, the tempo, because we've got that responsibility for the supporters. Football is a game that, and our chairman always says that Pirates influences the happiness index of the country because of the large number of supporters that follow the club, and they want to be happy not just with the result but with the style of play. So we have that responsibility to maintain that dominance, that speed, that intensity, that tempo. But also, once you've got that, you've got to also be a little bit more controlling in using possession as a tool to give you a bit more control in both phases, in attack and in defense. Once you've got the lead or results and control, and that was probably our hardest thing to do in the first two seasons. And even harder in this season when the team changed and we lost a lot of experienced players, and a lot of younger players came in, and it's not always easy to teach the less experienced younger players the phases and the times of when to play for dominance, when to play for control, particularly when every time you have the ball, whether it's 2-0 or 3-0 to you, the supporters still encourage you to go forward, and then you're at risk of turning over possession and suffering counterattack. So these are some of the things that we've consistently had to work on. But of course, possession was always a basis for our work, and this was greatly informed by us trying to use possession as a means of being a little bit more secure defensively, because the team had conceded a lot of goals in the previous seasons.
I read an article, an interview with you, said that you wanted to create a culture of honesty, integrity, and perfection. I want to get your thoughts on how would you describe honesty in a professional environment?
I think honesty is the basis of any working environment, because of course, like in business or in any other sphere where there are relationships, trust is of paramount importance. The basis for trust is honesty and integrity, and for me, to strengthen relations amongst players themselves, to strengthen relations between the technical team themselves, and then the relations between the club and the fans, the club and the players and the coaches. It's important to be honest with each other, but sometimes not everybody is open to honesty, and that's one of my biggest lessons that I've learned in the last couple of months is you can't be as open to everybody as you'd like to be, and that brutal honesty is not something that is easily receptive, because not everybody is as open as you would like to be. And that doesn't mean that you lose control, or you lose your leadership style. But in certain moments, you've got to understand that you've got to deal with people in a different way, and not everybody needs that blanket approach. So, for me, the honesty is the basis of trying to strengthen relations, and the trust, because without that, then coaches talk about losing the change room and losing the dressing room, but ultimately it's losing that the trust that takes place between the players and themselves, and players and the coaches.
This balance of honesty that it's really interesting, because we don't normally talk about that. We just think that it's good to be honest, or you have to be honest. But yeah, I mean, I found that when I've worked as well, is like everyone wants honesty, and you're not going up and pointing out flaws, but how do you balance or tier? Is that down to the strength of the relationship, or is that knowing the person a little bit better? Or how do you navigate through that?
Yeah, I think that's exactly that. I think it's knowing the personalities, and like I said to you, I think you can't always speak what's on your mind with everybody, and you've got to learn. And I, as a young coach, I went through that phase where I thought I've just got to deal with everybody the way I deal with everybody, and that's that's about fairness, that's about openness, and that's the honest way to do things. But I then came to realize that you can't always be as honest and as approachable to everybody as a coach, and sometimes you've got to be honest with people in certain ways, and try to drive the message across using different mediums. But at the same time, there's also moments where you've also got to allow certain people to solve problems themselves, and not be in their faces, because I think sometimes the mistake that, especially as a young coach, that I made was, the energy, the enthusiasm that we have, it always brings us into trying to express ourselves, and at times it's not always the right thing to do. It may be the honest thing to do. It may be that you mean well, and your intentions are good, but not everybody is receptive to honesty the way you would be receptive to honesty, and that for me has been, like I said to you, the biggest lesson in the last couple of months.
Let's talk about Micho then. You mentioned him before. He's described your relationship was like you were like brothers. And you did mention it about building relationships. Something we don't really talk about is the relationship between the technical staff. So, I mean, how important is that their relationship? And then going on the question before then, how can you be friends, be open, but still you have a responsibility as an assistant coach to disagree and state your case in a respectful way? How do you work around that?
Oh, first, I think with working with Milutin Zrejovic was a very interesting time for me, because I haven't seen a person that has so much capacity from an EQ perspective. His emotional quadrant for me is second to none. His ability to absorb difficulty and still not react to every single situation was incredible for me, and he also his assurance of himself and his qualities as a coach, and knowing himself was huge, because he was never intimidated by my presence, never intimidated by my opinions, never intimidated by my honesty also, because I think sometimes maybe even with him I was at times brutally honest, and maybe too honest, and as I said, I think that has been for me, while I've been a pirate, has been my biggest lesson, is There were moments that were even captured on television where they'd find us disagreeing, and the TV would capture those moments. And I understand now, when in retrospect, when I sit back and I analyze and I check and I say, in retrospect, I understand why people would assume that in certain moments that disagreeing could have easily be misinterpreted as being disrespectful. And I understand that, because there are times and there are places to disagree. But football, being the sport that it is, that pushes so much emotion out of all of us, is one where you've really got to have that emotional control and emotional intelligence, and that was one of the things that Militant Rejovic was very good at, was his emotional control and his ability not to react to every situation. And sometimes you would think he'd be dishonest, but he actually would rather not say what is on his mind, in trying to also protect the relationship between sometimes himself and the technical team, or sometimes himself and the players. And that was the biggest lesson that I learned. And like I say, it was probably the biggest mistake that I made as a coach when I arrived at Paris, was at, in certain moments I was too honest. And as I said, when you look back, you say, in this moment, maybe with a little bit more emotional intelligence, you would have held back a bit, and waited for the right time. But unfortunately, like we say, you don't have time in football, because if you don't say what's on your mind at that moment and you concede the goal, there's also a lot of that negativity that plays in your head, to say, oh my goodness, if only I had spoken about this and stopped this from happening, or that, maybe the result would have been different. But it is what it is, and we learn and we live.
Yeah, it's challenging as an assistant coach, and I've been there as well, where you're sitting there and you're thinking, it's probably time for me to respect the silence, but then there is a voice at the back of your head that's like, yeah, but to be true to the team and to be true to yourself, you have to open your mouth. And then
Exactly.
sometimes you can be 4 words in, you'll be like, I should have listened to the other voice, can't you?
No, 100%. And that, I think as we go on, I think that comes with experiences, and that comes with knowledge, and a little bit more knowledge of yourself and the environment, a bit more. So I agree with you, and they say, but really the reality is also understanding what your role is, and trying to adapt your role as an assistant to the character of the head coach. Because for an example, I've worked with 3 different head coaches in the PSL, and all 3 were completely different, and I could adapt myself to all 3, and my role as the assistant was actually very different with all 3. And with Militin was more, he needed me in that moment, when he was in charge of Paris, to be more of a hands-on decision-making assistant, because he was more of the emotive one during matches, more passionate, more driving, and at times couldn't make adaptations in relation to what the game needed. And he needed me as an assistant to be able to make those sort of decisions. But with Steve Compella, for an example, or with Pitso Musimane, they were coaches that were more hands-on on that. And then they needed a different type of an assistant coach, a coach that could assist them with managing of the squad, managing of training content, and that in that other space. So I think as an assistant coach, yours is to try to adapt your character, which is not always easy, to bring balance between yourself and the head coach in relation to his character and the needs of the team, because that's how you get the best out of everybody, and that's not always easy, because sometimes there's there is a clash of personalities, and how do you then adapt yourself to make sure that you're still not seen as trying to be above or disrespecting the head coach, but also giving your honest input to make sure that the team is just as successful, whether you are in charge or not. I mean, it's the head coach, of course, at the end of the day, is the one that bears the brunt for the result. But ultimately, you're only as good as the people that are around you, and your responsibility as a head coach is to lead the people that are responsible for the results.
You talk a lot on social media, and you've shown clips about your use of video analysis. Been excellent, the detail that you use. Want to get your thoughts. How do you implement this, and what are some things that you would advise coaches to do with video in terms of how often they show it, when they show it, how they back up training sessions, etc.? What's your thoughts on that?
I think you're probably asking the wrong person, because I think because I'm really a slave for video analysis and its use, because I use it for almost everything. I use it for pre-game planning. I use it for stealing of coaching methodologies. I watch a lot of coaches and football teams all around the world, and I try to make sure that I stay up to date with the latest trends from a tactical perspective. And sometimes I come to training every morning, and I'm on the back of my analysts to tell them to cut this clip and that clip to show to the players, because I think we've got a huge responsibility, particularly in an environment like ours in South Africa, where we're not at the level of where modern football is, and we're trying to play catch up. And it's our responsibility as technicians to make sure that the gap doesn't widen even more. In fact, we close the gap, and we try to make sure that our standard of football is just as competitive and tactically and technically at the level where the rest of the world is. And that you can only do by trying to stay abreast and learning from where everyone else is. So from that perspective, I use video technology and the use of clips from some of the best teams in the world, and to try to get clips from them and how they do certain things and their principles in relation to a Man City, for an example, how they would still high press, but sometimes high press with a 2 or a 3. How they would still high press in relation to maybe the qualities of the opposition that they've seen. Do they force the opposition to play inside and set pressing traps inside, or do they force the opposition teams outside and set pressing traps outside? The fundamental idea is important, of course, is the high press, but when they're high press in relation to different opposition, how they adapt to that, and those are some of the things that I use video technology for, because not everybody learns through just listening to what the coach is saying, but also the importance of showing them from that. You show them, you tell them, and then you practically execute, and those are, from a didactics perspective, are the stages that are easier to be able to get, if followed properly, to be able to get the right outcome from a teaching perspective. But also, having said that, I still use video technology and footage for opposition analysis. So we would watch the last 5 games of the opposition, try to back that up with the data, and we are fortunate enough that we've got some of the best analysts to assist us in getting data with regards to the opposition, and trying to find ways where we can find superiority and an advantage on the pitch. So to analyze the opposition, to watch the last 5 games, etc., but also to do that with our training sessions, the daily analysis of our training sessions, daily preparation of our training sessions, and then the opposition or the analysis of our matches, and trying to consistently grow and improve our game model and our performances. We would use that a lot in doing our corrections, and we introduced something this season which I see is well, in Europe is big already with regards to expected goals and expected goals for, expected goals against, expected scoreline, etc. So trying to base what we see from a footage perspective and trying to get data to see whether that supports the opinion that we get from the match. And sometimes you find that the result is contrary to the performance, and that they don't speak the same language. But then as technicians have got to try to find solutions in relation to that, and how do we get the expected outcome with the performance to relate to the actual outcome, and are we overachieving or underachieving in relation to where we should be in particular phases of the season, etc., or are we moving towards, are we on track in terms of moving towards where we want to be, from not only from a performance perspective, because sometimes in society, in modern day society, and especially in coaching, we tend to be judged by the results, but the reality is, for us, the most important thing is the performance, and the performance sometimes indicates whether or not you can sustain the results or not, and can you improve the results or not, and the performance is a huge indicator for that. So we use video technology, but and you said to me, what advice would I give to coaches is be careful, because it could be, there's a huge saying, it sounds very cliche, but there is something called analysis paralysis, and I am victim of that. You could easily find yourself being overly dependent on analysis, and neglect what they call the curative phase, which is the detail that comes with observation from actual live, real performance from what you see, and that intuitive sort of feel that coaches have, and that is what I would advise coaches, be very careful, because an over reliance could lead to that.
When coaches get a job, sometimes they say, I need time. They're almost buying time, and they're saying, well, give me time. It takes time to make changes. And
Yeah.
you get that line a lot. I saw a quote from you that was like the complete opposite. There are so many others that are behind me in this queue who are waiting for their opportunity. But if I mess up and I don't show the young coaches who are pure students of the game to make it, then I give little hope to the next generation of young technicians. Drives me to succeed. It's powerful, because I think you're taking responsibility for a certain amount of pressure. There's a lot of pressure on coaches and on you already. Do you feel as if that put more on you?
Well, I suppose if you don't want pressure, then you shouldn't be in the industry of coaching, because I think it comes with the territory, and we've always got to find our own why, find reasons as to why we do certain things, because if it is just in relation to ourselves, then sometimes we don't have the motivation, endurance to continue. Wenger always says the difference between people that succeed and the people that don't is not motivation in itself as a term or as a feeling, because there's motivation intensity, and everybody's got their days where the intensity of your motivation fluctuates between high and low. You wake up one morning and you're extremely motivated to do even the most mundane of tasks, and he says successful people have what we call motivation endurance, that stamina, where they outlive their challenges and the obstacles that they come across. And motivation stamina is driven from what we call intrinsic motivation, which is basically the motivation that comes from inside of you. And that the basis of that is knowing your why. knowing why you do certain things. And when you know that it's not just about you, you've got a responsibility that goes beyond just yourself. You are then able to carry out this responsibility. You are then knowing that you are accountable not just to yourself but to many other people out there, and this allows you to continue to face even the most difficult of days and difficult of challenges, and which, as coaches, those come thick and fast on a daily basis. So I think it's important that every coach has a why, and every coach knows that as a leader, they know why they do certain things, and they know why they are put in the responsibilities that they are put in. Because for me as a young coach in South Africa, and to be given some of the privileges as a young coach who didn't play professional football in this country, to have worked for two big clubs already, Mamelodi Sundowns and Orlando Pirates, is an extreme privilege, and I count myself extremely fortunate. But I also understand that I'm accountable to many other young coaches who would have loved and who continue to pray for that privilege, and many other young coaches who continue to work for that privilege, and many other young coaches who are behind me in the queue waiting for their opportunity. Because if we do not show that as young coaches we are able to lead, as young coaches we are able to make a difference, as young coaches we are able to take up responsibility, if we do not show that, then it's not just our failure, but it is a failure to the rest that are in the queue waiting for their opportunity, because then they've got to now change and look for employment in other avenues. So the good thing is when you start to see a lot of young coaches attending coaching seminars and coaching courses, and you say, goodness me, this is the role that we've played in society. These are the footprints that we've left on the sand, and when you're a trailblazer, unfortunately, you've got an enormous responsibility that goes beyond even your own success, and that's got even a huge bearing on your own well-being and your own life, because you know that the responsibility goes beyond just yourself, and as you say, then it's easier to deal with the pressure. It's easier to deal with the pressure because you know the longevity of the success, because you've left a legacy that will continue to grow for many more years.
What a way to finish. I cannot believe we're out of time already. So it's gone way too quick, and I might have to get you on again. That was amazing. I've loved it. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Gary, and thanks for the opportunity. I'm humbled. It was great having a chat with you.
Thanks so much to Rulani for his time and his insight there. I hope you enjoyed it as much as I did. It's funny whenever you haven't met anyone or you haven't spoke to anyone, but you kind of follow them online for a period of time and you feel as if you know them because of how they talk or because of the message they promote and the stuff they put out. And that was the case with Rulani for sure, because I always felt that he was really values based in what he was putting out. I always felt he was really detailed in the way that he put up tactical content, and in talking to him, those two things come across really well. First of all, in his philosophy and talking about how much he wants to get the balance right between those values but also pushing people and challenging people, and then that self-awareness piece and those relationships about that honesty piece that he was talking about. Sometimes it's not right to be as honest as you want to be all the time, and that reflection, thinking about it, self-awareness, all those things that go into it. It's very complex, and I think whenever you're working at a really high level like the Orlando Pirates, and there is so much pressure on people to perform, players, staff, coaches, that you have to be really intentional and detailed about how you are actually communicating to people first and foremost, and then your work. When he talks about the video, the process of video analysis, and how detailed he is about that phrase that he came out with, I'm a slave to video analysis, that tells you that he probably spends hours and hours and hours not only watching it but preparing it for his players. And if he's so detailed and so prepared in how he thinks about his relationships, then you then scale that back to then how he puts his work together. You start to think that, all right, he's not just putting a 2-hour video and asking players to watch it. He's using animations. He's aware of the time that he's asking them to do it. He's aware of when he's putting it in front of the players, what players he's putting it in front of. And I think all those things are the daily choices and decisions that a coach has to make at that level, because if you get those decisions wrong with the top players, it can impact relationships, and it can impact buy-in, and it can impact your ability to be successful as a coach. So I thought that he put all those things together really, really well in that interview, and I was really, really impressed. I learned a lot from that, and when I was going back over the interview again, I wrote like 2 pages of notes. So I will put those out on the website very, very soon. We'll put the podcast notes out there, and hope you enjoyed it. Would love to hear your thoughts. At Gary Curneen on Twitter, at Gary Curneen on Instagram. I wish Rulani all the best in his new position at Chippa, and really, really excited to see how he does. So thanks so much to him for coming on. Thanks for listening. I will speak to you very soon. Goodbye.
Thank you for listening to the Modern Soccer Coach Podcast. For more coaching topics, sessions, and resources, head on over to Coach Curneen on Facebook or visit the website at www.modernsoccercoach.com.